So I made a video a couple weeks ago saying that I think that Charles Leclerc is the main challenger to Max Verstappen, and I stand by that. And this week I'm going to go one step further and say that I think that Charles Leclerc is actually going to be the person who's going to win the World Drivers' Championship, and it's not going to be Max Verstappen this year. And there are a bunch of different reasons and also a bunch of different factors that I think are coalescing. But I think there's just one main reason. I'm going to get into that one first, and that's this: is that every year in sports, I think that we underestimate the degree to which the team that wins really deserves to win. They really deserve to win in any sport, whether it's F1, whether it's in football, whether it's in American football, basketball, baseball. Like even the teams and even the instances where the person or maybe someone else deserved to win it more, maybe, but the team that won, you have an argument about why they showed up and they deserved to win that year. Some of the most famous upsets, even like you look at the Giants, in American football, 2007, 2011, like, yeah, these were flukes, but like that's just who the Giants are, and they're just a fluky, chancy team that is either going to lose, is either going to be, get the first round pick, the first overall pick, or they're going to win the NFL championship. That's just who they are, and even in crazy circumstances, they still deserve that win, right? Or you can look at F1 history, right? Like you have the famous Max versus Lewis. I know that people argue about that. I have a video where I debunk the arguments, but even so, I think that even the biggest Lewis stands have to agree that Max did show up and Max did deserve that championship, even if they think that Lewis deserved it more. And even some of the biggest, screw ups, right? Like for example, the Alan Prost Ayrton Senna one, where Alan Prost drove Ayrton Senna off in Japan, and then even when Ayrton Senna won, Alan Prost then went to the stewards and got Ayrton Senna disqualified. You could say that Prost didn't deserve to win that one, but even in that situation, Alan Prost understood that F1 is as much of a political sport as it is a sport that's decided on the racetrack, and he played that political game better than Ayrton Senna did. Ayrton Senna didn't want to play that game; he just wanted to resolve it on the track, and you lose some races because of that, right? And I think that the best one obviously is James Hunt versus. Well, I can't believe I forgot. I just blanked out his name, but the famous Ron Howard movie. I can't believe I. Anyway, the James Hunt championship. You can say oh, he didn't deserve that because he Niki Lauda because he Niki Lauda got injured and this and that. But James Hunt went and raced in Japan while it was pouring rainy, and Niki Lauda didn't do it, right? So he still deserved to do it, and he also played a good political game, right? Anyway, all this to say, I covered another video about why Lando Norris just doesn't deserve to win this championship this year. He's just leaving points on the table right and left. He should have never allowed for those team orders, back in Hungary. Hey guys, quick plug. I started a community on School for people to talk about F1, talk about football, talk about everything that's going on with this channel, all the subjects. Would love to have you guys join, come on. I'm putting the link in the bio. The first 100 members of the channel are going to be free, and then I'm going to start adding paid membership because I have to pay in order to host it. So, I need people to pay in order for me to host it. So, click the link, join, and now let's go back to the video. And then on top of that, he should have forced the issue to get the team orders 2 weeks ago in Italy, right? Wait, was that Italy? Yeah. But he just didn't do it. He just doesn't have that dog in him. He just doesn't have that fighter in him. I think it's pretty clear that Oscar Piastri is going to become the number one driver in McLaren next year. It's going to be kind of a Daniel Ricciardo, Max Verstappen situation. I think Lando Norris is going to be out of McLaren in 2 years. That's a whole different conversation. The point is that Lando doesn't deserve to win. Lando's a little bitch. It would be really terrible if Lando won because he's just not going for it, right? And the problem with Max this year is that Max just doesn't seem to want it enough this year. He just doesn't seem to really have that fire in him. you can make the argument, and I know that like this whole thing is to be filled with Red Bull fans who are going to argue with me, like, oh, it's the car, it's the car, it's the car. But in Azerbaijan, Checo was on pace to finish third. I mean, yeah, Carlos Sainz ran into him, but he was still on pace to finish the third, while Max Verstappen was sixth. So at that point, it's not the car. It's not the car, right? And you can tell that Max Verstappen is just going on tilt, and he's just, I think that what happened to him, and you see this happen in the past, is that Max started off in this position where he was the underdog, right? And he like really grinded in order to beat Lewis. Like the Red Bull was not as good as the Mercedes that year. And he's just been so dominant for the past 2 years that he's just completely forgotten what it feels like to have to muscle out a win. And so he's in the situations where it's like the car is so hard to drive. And it's like, it's not that the car is so hard to drive, it's just the car is not as easy to drive as it once was. But these incredibly hard driving cars is what every other driver on the racetrack who doesn't have Adrian Newey has been experiencing for the past 2 years, right? Like while you've been taking your victory laps, and while you've been like, last year he pitted in order to get the fastest lap. While you've been doing these types of shenanigans, like the reason why you've been able to do that is because your car has just been a rocket ship while no one else's has been, right? And I think that like now that he is back to being a mortal person, he's kind of worse than he was before he ever won the championship in the first place. While Charles Leclerc, has been through the fire, right? And I think that is really what is allowing, and what I think will make Charles Leclerc win this year, is that like he has been through the fire for the past 2-3 years, right? And like there are endless Ferrari memes, like about Charles Leclerc, about A, his luck, B, Ferrari's strategy, C, the car just losing performance left and right because of a lot of different issues, right? And like so Charles Leclerc has been in a situation where he was the golden boy coming into Ferrari. He even unseated Sebastian Vettel, and now and then 2-3 years ago his car just plummeted. And I even made a video at the beginning of the year about how I thought that Carlos Sainz was better than Charles Leclerc. That's how poorly he's been performing. But this year he's finally gone through the fire enough that I think he has that dog in him, and he has the dog in him in order to win. Now let's look at the actual numbers, because the numbers like seem like it's an insurmountable lead, but it's not. First of all, he's 19 points behind Lando, right? So if we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? Literally, he just needs to score 3 more points than Lando per race in order to beat Lando. I don't think that beating Lando is going to be that difficult. The question is if he has enough points to catch up to Max, right? Because again, like he's behind by 19 points. It's 7 races between the two of them. You literally just have to average a 3-point difference. There's a 7-point difference between first and second. There's a 3-point difference between second and third, and there's a 3-point difference between third and fourth, right? So literally all he has to do is just be ahead of Lando in every single race, or if he is behind Lando in like 2 or 3 races, just make it up, right? And I think he's clearly able to do that, right? Now the question is like, can he catch up to Max Verstappen, right? So he's currently 78 points behind Max Verstappen, so basically he needs to score about 11 points more than Max every single weekend, right? Now, that might seem insurmountable, but it's really not. And the reason why he's not, and I think this is something that a lot of people have been like missing this for some reason. Like I've not seen this in the discourse at all. Maybe I'm just looking in the wrong places. But like the next race on the calendar is Singapore. Singapore is Max Verstappen's absolutely worst race. Like Max cannot perform at Singapore. So let's just look at like the past years, right? So last year when he literally won practically every single Grand Prix, last year Max was averaging more than 25 points per weekend, right? He scored 10 points in Singapore, right? Let's look at 2022. He scored 6 points in Singapore in 2022. Let's look at 2021. There was no Singapore in 2021, right? Yeah. Anyway, the point is he's terrible at Singapore. We can go back to 2019, but at 2019, it doesn't really matter that much, right? Because he was a completely different driver back then. Anyway, he's bad at Singapore. Singapore's coming up. Even when Max had the best car, he was still scoring 6 points at Singapore, right? Imagine how bad he's going to be at Singapore this year. Max Verstappen could very easily score 0 points this weekend, and I actually think he's going to score 0 points, right? So let's say Charles Leclerc wins, right, and even takes second place, right? By the way, Ferrari's not bad at Singapore. Last year, Carlos Sainz won at Singapore, right? So like the Ferrari can perform at Singapore, right? It's just the Red Bull can't. So let's say he wins. He gets 25 points, right? This 78th point lead goes down to 53 points with 6 races to go. Max Verstappen in the past, 5-6 weeks, he has been average. He's basically, his median has been about 15, has been like what he's been putting up, right? So if Charles Leclerc can just go on a run, and I think he will. I don't think Lando has it in him. I don't think Charles Leclerc's biggest obstacle right now is Oscar, right? But if Charles can go on a run right now and score 18 to 25 points a race, while Max is scoring 8 to 10 points a race, he's there. He's there. He has 6 races to make up a 53-point deficit. Come on, right? And, I think that there are also going to be so many different aspects of this championship for Charles that are going to be, like, really kind of amazing, right? So, like, first of all, the fact that he was the one who drove Sebastian out of Ferrari, right? And Sebastian was the last great Red Bull driver before Max Verstappen, and then and then he's the one who unseats Max Verstappen from the throne. That's a cool, little story. The fact that, his season was turned around by winning in Monaco and Monza is another cool part of the story. The fact that Ferrari would have won, like he would have won because McLaren pulled a Ferrari is also a great part of the story. The fact that he wins his first championship the year before, like, let's be honest, like Lewis is brought in order to win because Charles I don't think Fred has that much confidence in Charles in order to win, at least not right now. If he's able to win his first championship the year before Lewis comes in, it's very clear, hey, Lewis, I'm actually the number one driver. That's another great dynamic. Like, there's so many awesome facets to the story of Charles Leclerc winning his first championship with Ferrari this year that I think that it's kind of star-crossed. And, I think that, Charles is going to win. I don't think Max deserves it. I don't think Lando deserves it. I think Oscar is a little bit too far back in the points. I mean, he's only 13 behind Charles, but, with that 100-point deficit and 6 races to go, Max really needs to bottom out in order for Oscar to win. And I think that's possible, but I don't see it happening that badly. But one thing to also keep in mind is that so let's take Monaco out of this, right? Because he wasn't able to pass anybody, right? Like if you just look at Max, right? Like you could say like, oh, but like he scored, 18, 10, 12, 18, 8, 10, right? Like, oh, he's not actually doing that bad, right? But like you just look how he's just bottomed out here. He's just bottomed out in this area, right? And like his trend line is going down. Like he could very easily, like right now he's scoring about 10 to 12 points a race. He can very easily start scoring 8 points a race, 6 points a race. The dude is on tilt. The dude is like, apparently just doesn't have that dog in him. And so Charles does, and it looks